Okay, perfect. And so I want to first thank everyone for your attendance and your attention. I know this is not a typical meeting. Typically, me, Monique Thomas, Cornerstone, would be in the background supporting you residents leading this. Today is a little special in that although we had although no specific projects were before you, having filled out the application and all of that, I did ask Jake if uh, if the DRC could make some space, create some space. Hello. Make some space, create some space to hear what Cornerstone, coupled with a number of neighborhood organizations and entities, are interested in submitting to the CDA, the Community Development Administration for the City of St. Louis, for prospective projects in our footprint. And so I think what we have right now, because we're still pulling everything together, it's not very detailed what I'm ready to present because I'm working on the rough drafts right now. But I did want to give you an idea of the projects. And so it might be the case that you are not prepared as a body to discuss or offer a letter of support formally, but that is something that we would be interested in seeking from you all. And you can let us know what time or what format or what level of information would make the most sense for you to. Oh, yes, I can turn my volume up. I'm not sure if that's my volume. I can speak louder. How about, yeah. I'm like you don't care about my volume. Is this better? Or only slightly? Can you hear me all right?
I can hear you.
I can hear you.
Oh, okay, cool. All right, cool. I'll try to speak louder. I'm not exactly sure what level of information you will need as a body to be able to issue a letter of support formally, but we did work on this in accordance with the We Collab plan, and we have presented this in a very similar format to the We Collab Steering Committee, who we're getting comments from right now through Friday, and it is due on the 15th. And so the NOFA specifically, excuse me for not introducing it correctly, for those of you who don't know, is the Neighborhood Transformation Notice of Funding Availability from the city, leveraging ARPA dollars. So there was feedback that was captured from the city and how they should disseminate ARPA dollars, ARPA funding. Most of it was immediately prioritized by the community for direct needs. But then there was a different conversation and feedback they got saying we actually, seeing as this is like a triple pandemic, we really do want this to help and affect the built environment and build up our neighborhoods. And so $20 million was allocated to the Community Development Administration to be able to use it for across 4 topical areas. One was actual like housing production, affordable housing production. The second one was proactive development, namely like pre-development dollars. The third one was home repair. And then the fourth one was neighborhood beautification and capacity building to support neighborhood entities and other people doing work in community development. And so $20 million was released. I feel my child coming downstairs. Hold on one moment. Please excuse me. So $20 million was allocated for that for the entire city. And so we anticipate a lot of competition for these dollars, but because we also have, we meaning the West End and Visitation Park, our footprint, are also putting forth a neighborhood plan before PDA, the Planning Commission, for consideration, I think we are positioned to be able to leverage the We Collab plan, as it's called. Those of y'all who are kind of catching up there. So the We Collab plan will be going in front of the commission for approval in June. I think June 14th, I think is the date. And so we think, although it doesn't guarantee us anything for CDA or this money, I think we can at least point to a lot of the community engagement that was already done. So most of these projects that I'll briefly kind of present or introduce to you fall or support aspects of what we heard in the We Collab plan. So that was kind of high level, but I know because we have Maya White, who is our neighborhood manager, I wanted to also kind of create space for, sorry, Maya, to put you on the spot too, but to create some space for Maya to, one, introduce herself briefly to the DRC, and also if you can fill in any other information that I might have left off, if that's okay, Maya.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. Hi. My name is Maya White. I am your neighborhood manager, as Monique said, from SLDC. So basically, my job is to make it a little easier to go across public entities, city officials, residents, business owners, and community development corporations to facilitate the economic growth and stabilization of some of our most disenfranchised and marginalized communities. There are neighborhood managers for all 79 neighborhoods in St. Louis, and I just so happen to be privileged to be in a part of town that we know as the West Side, particularly in this neighborhood called the West End, where I grew up. I'm very happy to be. So what I do is basically connect you with the economic resources that you would need to sustain a business, a residence, or a project. I work as a essentially an kind of eyes on a little bit of everything that is going on in our area, and a connector, sort of a strategist who is able to connect the right parts to one another in order to move forward all of our goals and ideas as we do more development north of Delmar. I have an office downtown at SLDC's main office. I have an office in Delmar Divine, and I also have an office at Sumner High School inside of the Northside Economic Empowerment Center, where we provide business services and also help contractors get connected with bids in the city, particularly women and minority contractors. So really just into the idea of equity and making the city a place that is livable for people of all walks of life. I have a very extensive history in St. Louis as far as my participation in social and political roles. And so now I am taking those skills and that knowledge into an economic environment, and really trying to hone in on how we can help people stay competitive in what we call the future of St. Louis. So that's my spiel. It's getting longer over time is what I'm realizing.
It's good though. I like what you do. Yes.
Thank you so much. But I'm really grateful and humbled to be in this role and to help serve you all. So just let me know if there's anything that you need. Monique has my contact information and can pass it along or get you connected with me. And I just look forward to working with everybody.
I want to know how you're staffing 4 offices. Are you splitting yourself into 4 different ways? That's crazy.
I got 4 me's. Yeah, there's 4 me's all out here doing the work.
Sometimes I bet you wish you did have 4 U's.
I feel that. Right. Depending on who you ask, I think a couple of us have a couple of versions of ourselves. Thank you, Maya.
Telling you. Absolutely. And as far as everything that you offered information wise with what's going on with NOFA and these other funding opportunities that are rolling out, I think that you're way on track. The only other one that I want to throw out there is the Economic Justice Accelerator Program that was just introduced by Mayor Tashara Jones. And that basically consists of funding that is public and private, and it's toward different aspects. There's 4 key components to the Economic Justice Accelerator, and those are going to be neighborhood beautification, stabilization. I believe that there's an element in there for roads and street maintenance, and let's see. I forget the other one, but if you go to our website at developstlouis.com, please excuse me, then you'll be able to find those 4 categories that these funds fall into. And those are additional opportunities that you all have to tap into resources that will help further your projects at Cornerstone.
And the West End generally.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely, the West End general, anywhere in the city where you're working, pretty much. But yes.
Thank you, Maya. Thank you. Okay, so without further ado, I did want to, and I don't know why, as I was talking, well, here, I'm gonna share my screen. So Cornerstone, we, as I think many of us know, but I don't think I've actually really formally kind of introduced Cornerstone before. I felt like I had to, but I do want to in this way. So Cornerstone, we are faith-led, but a CDC specifically dedicated to serving the West End. And at one point, how we entered into some of this work was in initiating the initial version of the West End and Visitation Park neighborhood plan. And we really heard from residents that they wanted this to be not an institution-led plan, but a plan led by the residents. And so during that process, that's where We Collab was created. But Cornerstone, I want you to know, has been alongside the We Collab Steering Committee as an advisor, as a technical partner supporting the ambassadors and engagement partners, administering the program for, like, so April Walker, the program that she leads, Cornerstone has been administering that, and we've been listening and advising throughout the entire time. And so although We Collab is in the place where they're going to be naming, who their administrator will be, what the implementation will look like, though Cornerstone has not formally been named that or operating in that capacity as of yet, at least, we did think that there was a small window, and we did need to organize a response to this NOFA, which prioritized folks doing it collaboratively. So I went over some of this, and these are some abbreviations that would be helpful to share for those who are not in the work as so much. Talked about some of the funding categories, and there's a flyer with information about it, but the biggest category is obviously going to be housing production, and followed by home repair. And then it's split between neighborhood beautification and capacity building, and proactive development. This goes over a little bit of the eligible uses. I will tell you that in organizing this NOFA, we spent most of our time, or the NOFA response, we spent essentially the last 4 weeks talking with different partners to see what they would be interested in. And because this NOFA is a federal opportunity, it is a bit of a beast. And so not everyone would be even eligible, even if they're a nonprofit, to actually complete the application in a timely manner. You need things like a registered federal UEI, aka SAM ID, other things like that. And so that's also why we stepped in. And so we've been spending our time talking with different entities who have projects. It's been really, really clear to us from CDA in Mr. Hamilton, giving your work. If you want to jump in at any time, you can, obviously. I just missed you there. I'm like, wait a minute, what am I talking about?
No. You're right. But I just have one thing to say because I've been critical of it from day one. Not from what you have. I think there was a marvelous program that is there, but I tend to think is that they are written to the point where the most wretched people in our city cannot benefit from it. And I think it's all by design. I have to go back long before you guys was born. There was Texas state's, not a state, but a U.S. Senator, Ralph Yarborough, you can look him up. And he said that you put the jam on the bottom shelf, all the little people can reach it. It should not have all these guidelines. Heaven knows that we need everything that's on here. And we should be able to apply for this on the back of an index card. There's just too much writing, and you just simply freak a lot of people out. And I get calls practically every other day about why is this so long? Now, I understand the federal regulation, but I have to say one thing and I'll shut up, is that policies, unfortunately, there are more bad policies than there are good ones. It was a law and a policy to keep slavery around. That was a policy. There's also a law after slavery to do Jim Crow. That was a policy. And there is still a policy in systemic racism. Get rid of the bad policies and we can make this stuff work. The fact is that nobody has to tell you to do what's right. But you do need permission to do what's wrong. Let's do what's right. Let's get rid of all these guidelines. Let's make it everybody eligible, and let's find a way to make this work. Then I'm zipped up for the rest of the night.
Well, shoot, so am I.
For 2024.
Exactly. Wow. Okay.
If I can just hop in very quickly, I don't mean to interrupt. I actually agree with the idea that these application processes box people out who have historically already been left out of the language of many of these documents. And that's something that we've been working with CDA on, with SLDC, is simplifying the language and or making the application so that it's more accessible for more people. So they are going to be hosting some open sessions over at the Northside Economic Empowerment Center in the next few weeks to help people get those applications pushed through and explain the language. Unfortunately, due to the deadlines on the public Q&A, I can't answer any questions from my end any longer. However, I would strongly recommend that we have as many stakeholders as possible in these sessions so that you all can bring up these concerns. And I think it's very reasonable to do so because most of the language is not created from people who are living in these particular environments. So I just want to throw that in there.
Thank you. Thank you, Maya. Well, I didn't think that was going to go that way, but just based on the comments, it has been, it has been, I know I'm just yet drafting some of the language with my colleagues, but it isn't because we've just wasted a lot of time. We've been really, really working to, one, figure out who in the landscape is ready, has enough ideas to get something in on time, and then two, honestly, figuring out the application. So
Understandable. These are definitely points of concern that we have been bringing back from just neighborhood manager's position. There's definitely been, I will say, majority of us have been in agreement that this application is not, it's just not very fun to deal with. If I can just say it in a very simple term.
How much time do we have to spend this? Is this part of the 18 months?
Yeah, it has to be committed, it has to be obligated by 2024 and spent by 2026.
All the more reason to simplify this.
Yeah. So this was the time frame. And so we essentially are looking to have a rough draft. We've assembled some review committee for this that will start to look at it from May 2nd to May 5th while we are writing it right now. If you would like to be on that review committee and share comments, please do let us know. Yeah, okay. So to give you an idea, and I won't spend too much time on this, but we had about 16 different folks fill out a interest form that we were circulating as early as I think maybe 1 week after the NOFA was released. But then boiled down to a few, just a few players who were ready and interested and had identified projects. So there are 2 entities that will kind of brief you on that are submitting the application. They're able to independently submit it outside of Cornerstone, but they are going to be joining our application. So it's one package. And then there are a few organizations that will be collaborators, and the collaborator language means that they have an idea conceptually, but they may not be in the position to either implement it or apply for the funds. And then there were a number of organizations that, based on what we understood, would not be competitive or ready, or did not identify responsiveness to the process we were pulling together. So that kind of often was a signal of readiness to apply to the actual application and maybe potentially implement the project, which may not be fair, but so that was what we pulled together. And you probably cannot see this so well, but this is a sense of like the workflow. Okay. So that said, and I understand this is tiny, so I'll make it bigger. So what you see here is how we are mapping out our application process. I'll make it bigger because I think when I move it, you'll be able to see. So quick walkthrough. So under housing, well, let me show you the key first. So the key, these are the folks who are leading their own application in kind of that mint color. Purple are what the application will be led with Cornerstone leading it, or submitted with Cornerstone leading it. And then you have that kind of muted, I don't know, why did I pick these colors that I can't describe? Well, it got a gray, bluish gray. They would be considered those collaborators. And then this gray is the exception, but it's we won't be in an application, but we'll be working with another entity on it. Okay, so high level first, under housing protection, we have the Dignity Challenge that comes from Cornerstone, looking at our existing units and repairing and wanting to rehab 4 of them. Under proactive development, which is the busiest one, we have FSF, which is the Foundation for Strengthening Families. You would be familiar with Good Shepherd, the leader of Good Shepherd, Cecilia Collins, in her work. This is an expansion project that she's seeking dollars for proactive development for an existing unit, but I'll give you a little bit more detail on that. Then 5908 Etzel. That's also a project with Cornerstone, where we're looking to have a hub, it's not a hub, but an expanded office space and community space that will advance and support some of the continued resident-led work, and also act as a resource for our residents who live in our renters who live with us in our space, like acting as a clubhouse. We have site control of that. And I will say that Good Shepherd, or FSF, as I have it represented here, also has site control. And then we have focus area activation, specifically that points to the parts of the We Collab plan as written right now, the drafted now, not yet approved, that have been identified and what it would look like to start to activate components of that plan, and ideas mentioned in the plan. We have partners that we've been in talks with for it. And then this one is a lot more, I wouldn't say controversial, but a lot more kind of creative. As they said, be creative, but they also said spend that money quick. It hasn't been fully named, but the Small Developer Support Fund, where we have a couple of smaller developers who would like to get started, people who are coming out of ULI, for example, who are interested in just getting started with some LRA lots or sites that they have control of, and figuring out how can we reserve some monies to get them going. That one is a little more experimental, but I can say more about that. Home repair, this is that kind of exception. I just have listed North Newstead. We heard a lot of demand from folks who really said we need home repair, that nothing else, that's the priority for the West End. We've seen that reflected in this in Best SDL St. Louis, Best SDL's Rooted program, who really saw most of the applicants were really interested in using their money for home repair. And so there's a way where we would connect with North Newstead and be a beneficiary, as the language, beneficiary, not a subrecipient, where we won't necessarily get the money. No West End entity will get the money, but we would partner with an existing program that North Newstead does across initially 21, but now 23, as I understand it, neighborhoods. And so they're looking to expand their program, and I kind of wiggled us in there. Our footprint in there, as some of the model for their expansion was inspired by the Rooted programs approach in terms of disseminating money. So we can talk more a little bit about that. And then neighborhood beautification and capacity building. I have here Pocket Parks is submitting a number of, submitting for right now 3, looking at 4 lots to have some control, site control of them, but also seeking to, based on the We Collab plan. So she picked the spots, they picked the spots based on the We Collab plan and different active focus area activation spots, and said, hey, I think this will be a good space for an actual pocket park, very similar to the pocket park that was piloted and completed and is being maintained by Pocket Parks right there in Clemens and Hamilton. And so we really heard, because at one point, whether people understood it or not, we heard a lot of, I heard, and a lot of us heard a lot of feedback about the selection of that particular site versus other sites further north. And so I think this is also kind of us talking with my hands so much right now, please excuse me, is also us responding to the feedback we've heard over the last 1.5 years, and aligning it with We Collab. We've been in talks with CCUNA, who brought some spots, who has site control, has been maintaining one spot particular on Montclair, but has other spots for beautification they have in mind. I understand that, Maya, you've been working with Ms. Sneed and CCUNA and thinking about what that would look like. But right now, as of this application, we're at least trying to have at least one more spot come up under Pocket Parks. And so I've connected the 2 of them, and we're figuring, they're looking at the narrative right now. And then I have here largely and kind of sloppily, because there is some overlap between Hodemont tracks and the focus area activation. But in this case, we're looking specifically at Windchilds Park, which would be according, like with the GRG existing conceptual plan, that's the head, that's what the trailhead, where it would end, but there's the trailhead. So it's of significance for GRG, and certainly our plan, and for when West End Neighbors. So we've been talking with West End Neighbors, who had already worked with a local architect, San Smith, in putting together a framework for what residents wanted to see in Gwen Giles Park, and then layering that over what GRG wants to be able to do from a construction standpoint. And so they've been connected, we've been connected, and we're looking at what costs would be. When has submitted the cost that San and that plan had laid out. And now we're crosswalking that with GRGs and pulling together an initial ask and the narrative for that now. And then engagement support. Engagement support looks like really capacity building. So Cornerstone, as I mentioned before, was a part of We Collab, the planning process. We were the administrator of the We Collab Ambassador Program, headed up by April Walker. And we saw a larger opportunity to expand the ambassador program so that we're also more formally working with the existing entities. I really could easily put DRC on here too, so that we're not just promoting We Collab in isolation, but promoting all of the work of CCUNA when surely, and this has been discussed, even though I didn't represent it here because we never spoke, but it has been represented like DRC, when we have projects and we need to get the word out and flyers and all those things, being able to use the ambassadors to do that would make a lot of sense. And that would be, and really, if this is to mirror a lot of what the We Collab planning process is in spirit, really the engagement support, the ambassador work was essential to not just collecting data, but being honest and being responsive to community. And I, as an administrator, had been really mindful of making sure, because this was a criticism we had heard of the plan, that really homeowners and Black middle class and middle class folks in general were overrepresented in the planning process potentially. So the ambassador support, we really wanted to make sure we were intentional about engaging renters, which Cornerstone would obviously naturally do because those are our people, like literally. So we want to continue with that, understanding that that has to be done with a certain intentionality, engaging folks in different parts of the neighborhood, in different spaces. Okay, so that's high level. I'll be able to provide some detail, but I know people are going to be asking, the first question might be, what does this look like in terms of what y'all asking for in terms of money? A lot of us are pulling together, not just our narrative, but our budget. Some of our narrative is led by the budget, and vice versa. But ballpark, if we were being aggressive, is probably closer to like 1.5 million for this, or closer to 2, based on not having crunched any numbers, but just looking at what I'm seeing in the narrative real quick and some numbers that we do have. And a lot of that is in proactive development.
Got one question. Did I miss energy conservation in your chart?
No, you didn't. I have no project representing that specifically. But I'm here for all of what, because look, I'm still writing this, so it's not there just yet. But so can you say more?
Well, it definitely needs to be there. I don't care where you put it, but it has to be there. Because this is our biggest hurdle that's coming now. And I think all you guys have seen it. It's not only here in the United States, but it's all over the world. My goodness, the hybrids used hybrids now have been out about 4 years. And pretty soon people are not going to be buying gas guzzlers. So we're going to need EV chargers. So yeah, I think is that we probably ought to stick energy conservation in there. And I think home repair and beautification program go hand in hand, because we're talking about facade programs for these homes. If we're going to beautify the neighborhood, We have to talk about the facade, and of course, you know, facade is painting, brickwork, and windows, and all those other good things. I don't have any problem with what I see. My problem that I told my people is that we have a problem delivering. It matters little with all the work you've done. It would be so sad and be downright sinful if we couldn't deliver on any of this. And I do believe, well, I know that $20 million is not going to be enough, but it will have some. Now, one other thing is that when I first saw this, we had $2.5 million that was sort of set aside in some other chart that we were going to use for revolving loan. I would hope that that would fit someplace in here, is that you could take that money instead of channeling it toward the large developers, which is going to wind up being that 2 or 3 people, 2 or 3 companies are going to get the bulk of the money. And for the people who actually, these programs you've written for, it's not going to get anything. So if we could take this with a small developer and sort of turn it upside down and let the small guys in the neighborhood organization get the picking and let these other folks come along, they don't need this money. The small folks need this money.
Maya, do you know? And I have heard about the revolving the loan fund. Can you speak to that?
Yeah,
If
I
you're
had a meeting where I met with Noel and Bill, and before all this was put together, and I was with Alderwoman Tina Peel on the road trip. We went to Louisiana. I want to get rid of this. I'm sorry. And she had suggested that we try to get a revolving loan. I think that works better. I think banks would be open to that. People could go in, and with a revolving loan, they can probably do a lot of little things for themselves.
Yeah, I mean, and part of this pitch that might be a little far-fetched. And so I'm trying to work it out with some, developers that have said, I am interested, and there's at least one, but seeing if we can contract with a single or a couple of local architects when it does come time to having them need to do renderings, or a group that does feasibility studies that we can pay now to help do some of that initial assessment for a couple of developers who are smaller, specifically those that do have site control. And, but I have to be so careful because they really don't want dreams. They really want plans, even early, preliminary plans, things that they think we can actually obligate timely and spend.
You're absolutely right. That was the first job I got out of when I got out of school in architecture. We had in Ohio what we call architecture design and demonstration. We went out and we did the footprints of buildings, and then we did the drawings, the sketches, and then gave those to the architect. The architect took them and went from there. What it does is that you get little guys like myself and other people who are interested in architecture. They don't have to be graduates, just interested in it, and all the small contractors, and you get them started in these projects. And you form some kind of relationship between the two, and you got something that's lasting, that's moving in the area of sustainability. The problem is when the money's gone, we may not have any sustainable forces in there. What would this show is that we spent $168 million, and bingo, it's the same thing. We haven't done anything to correct the problem, especially in North St. Louis, because a couple of the big developers will get the bulk of the money. Let's spread it out. That's going to be difficult.
Hope you're on a review committee.
But let's spread it out.
Hope you're on a review committee.
Hey, Monique, quick question. So this is obviously a lot of stuff. Is is it an all or nothing proposition where either you get all of the things you're looking for or nothing, or is it a, we'll
Yeah,
fund
great
this and
questions.
not this?
Great question. They're absolutely going to pick it apart. And so all these applications could be can be standalone. It could be the case that you see all the purple representing Cornerstone as an example. I use as an example. They could only fund North Newstead for this, and which is hopefully it'll be unlike, but like they can only fund, let's say, Good Shepherd, and they might allocate, $500,000 to Good Shepherd for their project. And that would be the only thing they contribute to the West End.
So will each of
potentially.
these be separate applications, or it's all submitted as one and they just choose what's funded?
Yeah, it's going to be one application, but each one of these will be its own kind of mini application or mini narrative. So there's like one cover letter that explains kind of the umbrella approach, and then there are 1-page narratives and then 7-page kind of explanation of each project. So each project will be submitted separately and be kind of doled out separately for evaluation. But it'll be one submission. And then some have pro formas attached to them, but that's pretty much it. So each one of these projects will need to be represented like essentially in 8 pages. Each one would be 8 pages.
Gotcha. And then why North Newstead? I recall a couple years ago that I think Park Central was offering home repair grants for West End and other near North neighborhoods, and I didn't realize North Newstead, we were in their footprint. Is there a reason why we're partnering with them and not Park Central?
Yeah, no, we're not in their footprint. We're actually not in their footprint. And so I know I know that they were, in talking to Constance and just casually talking to Constance, I know that they were adding neighborhoods that typically weren't in their footprint to this, that were ready for it. And the design of what she was offering was based on essentially Rooted. So we connected North Newstead with Rooted quickly. And I know that there is a relationship with Park Central and in the Rooted program. But in talking with Constance, who kind of made herself available in that way, we were just chatting about this, it came up like, if you're expanding there, would you also be willing to expand there? So to be honest, I did not reach out to all of the different options or reach out to Park Central separately, because we did like the model that North Newstead was doing.
Gotcha. Well, I mean, yeah, you work with people that want to work with you. I was just curious.
Not to say that Park Central has ever, for not even one moment, said that they wouldn't want to work with us, but we never approached them. And we've been in conversations with Constance. So we just kind of wrote ourselves in. Unfortunately, and this is part of the thing, unfortunately, with one of the criticisms, because I do think that CDA has discounted the amount of time it takes to do collaboration really well.
Got that right.
So things that seem right now in this conversation, that question, super obvious when you're moving so fast and trying to pull these things together. Like, and I think you'll probably find some of them left and right, like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Gotcha.
All right. There are a couple of projects that I did, and I know for timing, and I don't have all of the details, but there are a couple of projects I actually wanted to add a little bit more color to, specifically Foundation for Strengthening Families, or Cortega Collins, because DRC has written a letter of support for Good Shepherd, but there's been quite the evolution of that project. And I even have to say, as someone who sat around the WeCollab table, I didn't know the extent of some of the work that she was doing right there on page. I knew about, the daycare center, but her vision really has kind of exploded to something I think that is compelling. And I've read about it in a newspaper article, and she's definitely in our footprint. And so I think I wanted to, I took some of her narrative and I wanted to share some of it. I don't have any of the great visuals for it, but her vision specifically, her larger vision, let me get this. Her larger vision is to have a version of what would be akin to Harlem Children's Zone on page. Hold on, let me make sure I want to get this right. She's referring to it as, if you hear it, the Show Me Family Zone, the Show Me Family Zone. And that would be a 5-block place-based redevelopment plan. Okay. And so I'm not prepared to represent the fullness of the plan there, but I do think that one recommendation I would have, it would definitely have Cortega and Foundation for Strengthening Families come back and represent it to the DRC, and we collab, since I don't know how much of the We Collab process I know she wasn't involved in, but those probably should speak to each other. But I do love some of her approach. So she sees this as happening over the next 10 years or a decade. I will mention eventually it will include, educational components for early learning, elementary school and adult daycare, revitalize single family homes, a playground, basketball court, a community garden. So she has this vision. She's working with some experts that have expertise in developing at this scale. So she's quite serious about it. But for this NOFA and what she's looking for pre-development dollars to do is isolated to one part, her first part of her vision, which is the Good Shepherd Academy for Boys. The Good Shepherd Academy for Boys, which she is proposing may be one of the first all male early childhood education centers that she's seen in her research. But she would like to have that and would like to prioritize people within our footprint in coming here. So this, the redevelopment of, it's not 59, it's 57, 59, 57 page. But it includes her current daycare and I think her older daycare and the redevelopment of that. And is quite involved. But that's part of kind of their part one of their Show Me Family Zone, or part two, since she redeveloped the daycare. But I thought that was kind of significant and kind of visionary and big, and like, shoot, she should probably talk to the DRC about this eventually. So I'm sure I may have raised more questions, but I did want to let you know that's kind of part of a larger vision. And could be a standalone application by itself. But I think strategically it made sense for her to come up under the We Collab West End, because it's in our footprint. And that's what CDA basically said, like, we don't want all these applications from the footprint, even though we're gonna separate it. So you may have questions that I could take back to them, but that's at least one that I wanted to highlight. Okay, cool. Nope. Okay, great. Great. That's perfect, because I don't represent the organization, but I'm learning about it as we're pulling our narrative together. And it's, to me, quite impressive, but that's just, my opinion. Might be biased now that I'm working alongside them and reading the stuff. For 5908 Etzel, that is Cornerstone. It was a Prop NS property that it was, I don't want to air quote stabilized, but stabilized. But it is on the block where we have the most properties, 38 properties, right? 38 units. And so right now, for those of you who don't know, we operate out of one of our 2-bedroom apartments. That's our headquarters, which is great and lovely. You can stop by 6030 anytime. It's great. There are cookies and snacks and a Keurig, and it's great. And we think, as we're thinking about the level of accommodations that we want to offer our residents, and the ways we are looking to support We Collab, the operating system, we would like to have a facility that would reflect that. And so we are seeking proactive development dollars. We do have some equity that we're ready to put up for it, but we do know that the scale of it won't be enough. And I know some people think, well, we already have Del Mar Divine, but Del Mar Divine and any larger hub projects, that's not right now the vision. It's kind of keeping with how we do move, which is promoting intimacy. And so in working with the architect that we're working with right now, and talking about employing this project together, we're thinking this will be like an intimate space where people can come in and plan and think some resident activation where the ambassadors would operate out of, having a large printer, which was something that we are going to be writing into the engagement program, the capacity building support, having an actual like professional printer, not like a commercial grade one, but a professional printer that all the organizations can use for their things. So really a place for resident activation, since the West End is so busy anyway and active and vibrant. And we just believe that there's going to be a local renaissance that's happening. And we want a space that people can identify as like kind of a kickoff to some of that. Yes, thank you, Marion. Yes, exactly. For showing the article. That is right now zoned. I'm gonna let y'all know that is right now currently zoned residential. So we do anticipate having to come back to the DRC committee with all the site plans and other things to secure actual formal letter of support to rezone it for community use. So those are details that I'll provide there. The focus area activation. Right now, we're looking to prioritize Maple and Goodfellow, and within the the 2-block kind of radius, and specifically targeting and looking at the lot right next to B&B Market as one place that we want to maybe have some of the plans that conceptual plans that GRG put together be implemented there. And we're also looking at other smaller scale projects along Union as well. So, and then we did get some feedback recently from the WECA Lab Steering Committee table to look further north. And so one of the other focus areas is Page and Blackstone. So I'm trying to parse out other places that we might be able to start to write, like where work exists that we can get started, even though it's harder to organize things because we only have a couple of weeks to respond. But those are the 3 of the 5 focus areas that we're looking to develop. And so we're working with Yard & Co. lightly, who was the original planning partner, and Pocket Parks with GRG on some of that. And I think really that's mainly all. I can answer questions, but that's kind of at the level that I think would be appropriate given where we are in the writing process. Are there any questions or comments, suggestions? Anyone want to be on the team to review this?
So Monique, ultimately the goal is you would like a letter of support for this application from the DRC. I guess, do you foresee any of the, let's say, miracle, we got funding, you got funding for everything you asked for. What do you see actually being enough? Is any of this enough to do an actual, like the whole project, or is this just like basically startup money, pre-development cost money to do some of this stuff, except maybe like the small support fund and stuff like that, or small activation projects? But for any of like actually any of it, I guess.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, the housing production would be one that you would actually be able to see.
Okay.
but the proactive development, it kind of depends. So certainly for the focus area activation, it depends on how many people, where we are. Some projects have money to leverage, and they are submitting this, and their sources and uses table looks a lot different across some. So some, like some would even within the focus area activation that are not related to GRG, for example, might just be startup. Foundation for Strengthening Families or the Good Shepherd Project, I haven't seen all of their budget, but I do understand that they're leveraging other dollars, and this is kind of going to be closing a gap. I know for the 5908 project, we do have some equity that we have put in, but it probably will be a few years, couple of years before that project will be complete. But I do think what you will see kind of more immediate would be neighborhood beautification projects. So the pocket park work will probably quickly be able to, you know, be launched, because I know that team works fairly fast or quickly. So that's something that kind of immediately people will be able to see and experience.
Gotcha.
And of course, the work April does.
I ask obviously because, you know, there's a lot, and normally people come before the DRC with more, you know, baked proposals, but just given the timeline and the scope of all this, not possible. But, you know, I want to avoid, you know, not that I expect you to get the money and run and never talk to us again, especially since you're helping run the show here, but you know, don't want to be setting any precedents with other developers where you say, hey, you know, so we gave a letter of support to Cornerstone and we didn't really see anything yet, but we gave it to them anyway. Why can't you do that for us, type thing?
Yeah, and maybe this is like a unique example, and maybe it's not I don't even know if it's maybe if it's a letter of support or if it's, you know, individually members of DRC. I don't know how it looks, to be honest with you. I just know that I couldn't see us moving too far, too much further along without coming before the DRC. The irony would just be too much. So I've tried to keep at least Jake and Dr. Stearns aware that we're trying to pull this together. But it is, yeah, I don't want to set an unhealthy precedent. So I'm coming before you.
Can I add to this, Monique? I'm sorry, this is Trina.
Oh, please, yes, go ahead.
So the other thing too to keep in mind is this letter of whatever is written to CDA as a part of this application, and you're not approving, you know, saying that you are, you know, approve of any of these plans. It's really more of a letter of commitment that the DRC is aware of these plans and stands ready to engage once these projects hit certain points. This is what the DRC does, like, you know, putting in the letter a description of the DRC so it's clear that the DRC is committed to at least partnering with these entities to get this to fruition. That's not saying that you approved any plans, that you're aware of any more detail than what's provided here, but it's really more so speaking to how this collaborative group, all of these partners and the DRC would work together to fulfill the goals of this application. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So that's a different kind of letter than a developer coming to you saying we need something rezoned or we want to apply for these public dollars to build this, this, and this. Because this application isn't, for certain aspects of this, it's not asking for that greater detail.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's true, because even the example I just gave with 5908, it was me saying, once you make you aware, but we are going to come back looking
Correct.
for
And the same thing
rezoning.
with Good Shepherd.
Right.
And the
Right.
same thing even with these smaller developers. We don't, you know, once they get their projects, you know, ready to roll, then they would need to come most likely before DRC, depending on what they're doing. So this is not a letter, saying that we approve of any rezoning or we approve of blah, 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 but rather a commitment to fulfill your role as DRC in partnership with these organizations. We are aware of what you all do, and you all are aware of what we're applying for. Does that make sense?
Except maybe for the housing production one.
Mhm.
I mean, that's
Endorsing the update.
literally, that's renovating existing units.
Yes.
That's true. And for that one, if I need to do something separate, or if you want to write it, if you want to write it kind of separately,
Yeah, we could do that too. So yeah, I mean, the letter could be nuanced to this nuanced process. And this is, and I will say, just to add to the griping that we've already, just a little bit to the griping we've already done, I will say that this application does not follow any traditional grant making process either. Because you have experienced grant writers here scratching our heads trying to figure out what in the world this thing is really asking for. Because every time I read it, it's saying something different to me. But we're just trying to be responsive to it, but at the same time, continue to build on the partnerships we hope we have been building on through this We Collab process. And also leveraging what we have of value, leveraging our community assets, Cornerstone being one of them, to ensure that when opportunities like this come around, we can come together to do what's best for our neighborhood.
Right. Thanks,
As
Trina.
always, thank you for saying what I was thinking. I just appreciate that. That's all.
it's good. Yeah, so I mean, if this is written with the housing production being separate, and unfortunately we wouldn't have time. I didn't think to prepare, because that one I have, a full pro forma for that one, although I don't have full site plans for each unit. Don't have that for the rehab, but I do have costs, like hard costs for the housing production one that I could have offered, but because I missed the deadline in modeling this, I missed the deadline for this, and didn't think about it that way. Even if you were to say, to create language that maybe doesn't say you're against the project unless you are. But if you could support the other two, which would be not support, but agreed to be working with us on those other two, that would make sense. You can even take exception to housing production too, because I didn't bring it in time. All of that would make sense to me.
All right. Well, thank you, Monique, and good work on the Herculean task trying to wrangle the whole world and to come up with a compelling application for funding. And we certainly appreciate you taking the time to come present to us as well. Is there anything else that you'd like to share, or any other material that you didn't get to yet?
No, that is all I'm prepared to share. I have lots of other material, but that's all I'm prepared to share.
All right.
But if there are any other comments, like the comments that you shared, or I noted, and certainly if anybody wants to be a part of the process or have maybe some offline advice or considerations that we haven't thought about, I'm all ears.
Does anyone else have questions or comments?
Okay. Thank you for the time and for hearing us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, before we break out, and this will be a little different and a little weird, because this time we'll be asking probably Monique and Trina to step out. But before they do, I just wanted to give a quick update on a separate project so everyone can hear. I talked to this afternoon, Dr. Stearns and I had a conversation with a representative from Ameren. You may have heard talk or whispers or rumors that they are planning a new substation in the area. Their current substation, which is located behind Crossroads School on de Bolivar, is old and too small for all of this great development that's happening in our neighborhood. And so they need to replace it with a larger one. And it's something that they want to be up and operational by early 2025. So they had bought a piece of property at Union and Delmar at corner, I guess it'd be the southeast corner lot, which a lot of neighbors around that area, it's a very prominent corner lot at two prominent roads, spoke up against having a substation there. And so they're looking at potential alternatives and that are in the West End, but potentially Skinker de Bolivar Place as well. So in our discussion today, there's nothing has been decided. They're still very much wanting to engage with the community and look at different sites and want the community to potentially work with them, looking and vetting potential sites. And we were also told that, they are a utility and it's a little tricky, but there's the potential for maybe some sort of community benefit agreement, depending on what the site is and where it is, and a way that this could potentially benefit the neighborhood other than just having reliable electricity. So be on the lookout for more updates on that, but I wanted to give everyone that update so they know what's going on and dispel any rumors that a new substation is imminent, because there is, but where it's located and what it's going to look like is certainly still up for discussion with the neighborhood and surrounding community. So, all right. With that, I will say thank you very much to Monique and for all of the hard work that you do and making our neighborhood a better place day by day. And we'll be in contact.
Okay, I will stop the recording and you are the host. And so have at it. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.